Hello and welcome to another video tutorial. I'm Britta Swiderski and today I'm going to show you how to re-ink your Distress ink pads with the Tim Holtz re-inkers. I haven't made this video yet, even though I've made a lot of videos about Distress inks, because for a long time I didn't really think it was that important. I actually bought all of the pads before I bought more than one re-inker. I bought a vintage photo re-inker because that was the one I seemed to use the most and it felt kind of dry. So yeah, honestly, if you're low on cash and have to choose between getting a pad and a re-inker, I would go with the pads all the time because you can always work a little bit of color out of them even if they get dry. And they're not ruined if they get dry. You can always get the re-inker and add them later. So that's just my personal choice. But if you're a person who loves to buy things so that you're constantly having a full ink pad, buy the re-inkers and the ink pads together and maybe it won't feel so hard. But now I do have a lot of the re-inkers. I've been slowly collecting them. And have probably about 20 of the 36 re-inkers and then some of the seasonal ones to match. Just the colors that I use most often, or as I find a pad that is feeling a little bit dry, I just add in a re-inker to my next order, usually from Simon Says Stamp, of course. First of all, the first question, and I get this question a lot, is how do you know if your ink pad is dry? Well, there's two things you can do. If you're worried about finding a new, or picking which Distress ink color re-inker by next, I would say always default to the lighter ones because you're always going to end up using more of the pigment than a darker one. The darker ones seem to last longer for me, so go lighter. The next thing is, this is a Shabby Shutters. You can take the ink pad, ink it up really well with your ink pad, and then stamp it down. You can see that this impression is really, really weak. Whereas if I take my Crushed Olive one, but I have just re-inked this one. And I'm going to get my tool stamped up here. And you're going to see, you can see all of the edges here. So another thing is when you're blending, if you only have to dab it a couple times and you're like, okay, I'm getting a good amount of color. And then I'm dabbing this the same amount of times and it seems like I need to press harder and get it in there. That's when you know it's getting dry. Once again, it's a very gradual thing. You probably won't even notice at first, but one day you'll just take out your color, one of your favorites probably, because those seem to go the driest fastest. I knew Shabby Shutters would be dry because I use it all the time. And you say, oh, I have to work really hard at this, and that's when you need to re-ink it. Right now I'm actually going through and re-inking all of my inks because I just got probably like 12 re-inkers in. And so now I'm going to re-ink the Shabby Shutters. I've been going through and re-inking all my ink pads. So what you do is just take a dropper full of the ink, and it comes with an eyedropper, and I just like to go in a snake pattern across the pad. And you can tell by how fast it absorbs how dry it is. So this absorbed kind of fast, so I'm going to add another dropper full. I usually put a dropper and a half when I'm refilling, but if it's really dry, sometimes I put 3. Now when you have this where the color is staying on the surface for more than a few seconds, that's about when you can let it go. If you don't want to over ink it. So you can add some to the corners and that's pretty much it. And then you can just let it sit, just like normal. The ink will spread out and make it perfectly spread out over the ink pad. So that is just great. It does everything for you, really. The only thing that you ever really need to worry about when inking is don't over ink it, because otherwise you're going to have to dab it off on a piece of paper and waste that ink. Don't waste ink. But you know, also not a problem. But the only major thing is don't put the wrong color on the wrong pad. Because you'll need to buy a new ink pad. That's the only way you can contaminate your pads. And yeah, well, just, you know, double check the labels. So peel paint, peel paint. Let's see how dry this is. Okay, and you can see this absorbed right away, so I'm going to go in and add a little bit more here. It's absorbing pretty fast, so I'm going to go in and add some more. So that's 2 full dropperfuls, and now it's kind of hanging out on the surface a little bit. So I think that's about good. And then I can just go back and store my pads as I wanted them to. I would probably wait a couple minutes before I used them, just because all the ink's sitting on the surface. It might be too much. But other than that, wait 5 minutes and you're good to go. Oh, and one more thing. Sometimes you get a re-inker that doesn't have the eyedropper in it, and I forget which one I have that doesn't. I think it's Tumble Glass, yeah. This is totally a manufacturer defect, and Ranger will replace this if you email them. But I'm lazy and I haven't gotten around to it. I'm busy, I do other things. So if you have this problem, it's pretty easily remedied. Just create this nice little seal here with your Tumble Glass, flip it over, and draw around on the ink pad. And until you can get your replacement re-inker, that is a good way to re-ink your ink pad, and it will be just fine. So there's that little tip for you, and I will send that email to Ranger. But obviously I've gotten like 24 re-inkers and have only had a problem with one of them. So yes. Also, when you're traveling, always double bag these. Put them in a little mini Ziploc, and then put them in another Ziploc. Because one re-inker can ruin all of the labels of the other ones. They're very, very pigmented. So, hope you've enjoyed these couple little tips, and I will see you next time over on my blog at brittaswiderski.com. Thanks for watching.